Hello. Thank you for being with us today. Today is Good Friday. It's a day whenever we celebrate Jesus' death on the cross. Through no fault of his own, Jesus was put to death by hateful men. His life was taken from him, but in the end, it was all on our accounts. Today I want to talk about how we should feel about Good Friday, what it was like for Jesus. In Mark 9:30 and 30 through 32, it says, "From there they went out and began to go through Galilee, and he did not want anyone to know about it, for he was teaching his disciples and telling them, 'The Son of Man is to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And when he has been killed, he will rise 3 days later.' But they did not understand this statement, and they were afraid to ask him." The first thing that I want to talk about Jesus' death is that he knew exactly when and how it was going to happen. Jesus was not surprised by any of this. As a matter of fact, this was his plan all along, a plan that reaches back from the very beginning of creation. In Genesis, it talks about how Adam and Eve were tempted and sinned in the garden, the first sin by any humans. Even then, at the very beginning, God spoke to Satan, the enemy, and said, "You will strike man's heel, but he will crush your head." Even there in the Garden of Eden, at the beginning of humankind, God knew exactly how he was going to take care of the problem of sin, of the separation between him and us. I'm a sinner and you're a sinner. We all are. Every one of us has done what is wrong, and it separates us from God. We're not able to have communion and community that God built us for. It's what he so much desires, is to be with us and to love us. But our sin separates us. But even from the very first of those sins, the first mistake ever made, God knew that Jesus, he would come down to live as a man on earth and would die in order to take our sin away. If then this was a plan that Jesus foreknew so long in coming, it was absolutely voluntary. It was his choice to come, to have a life as a man on earth, and to eventually die. It was Jesus' choice to have this happen. None of this was him being caught unawares. He wasn't just a hero making the best of a bad situation. He came to earth to live among us just for this reason. God knew exactly what was going to happen, but he didn't shy away from any of it. He lived his life boldly, knowing exactly what he needed to do in order to save me, to save you, to have relationship and community with us, to be able to spend time with us forever. In Mark chapter 14, it says in verses 27 through 31, "And Jesus said to them, 'You will all fall away because it is written, I will strike down the shepherd and the sheep shall be scattered. But after I have been raised, I will go ahead of you to Galilee.' But Peter said to him, 'Even though all may fall, yet I will not.' And Jesus said to him, 'Truly I say to you, this very night before a rooster crows twice, you yourself will deny me 3 times. But Peter kept saying insistently, 'Even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you.' And they all were saying the same thing also. As Peter was below in the courtyard later that night, Jesus had already been arrested. One of the servant girl's high priests came, and seeing Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, You also were with Jesus the Nazarene." But he denied it, saying, "I neither know nor understand what you are talking about." And he went out onto the porch. The servant girl saw him, and began once more to say to the bystanders, "This is one of them." But again he denied it. And after a little while, the bystanders were again saying to Peter, "Surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean too." But he began to curse and swear, "I do not know this man you are talking about." Immediately a rooster crowed a second time, and Peter remembered how Jesus had made the remark to him, "Before a rooster crows twice, you shall deny me 3 times." And he began to weep. The story of Jesus' death is not one about a villain. His death was orchestrated by the religious leaders of his time, people that felt threatened by the change that Jesus brought. They liked the way things were, the control and power they had. They believed that what they did was right. But Good Friday isn't about them. It's not about why he was put to death. If Good Friday has a villain, then it is all of us. Jesus was not put to death by these religious leaders as much as he was by our sin. He came to earth explicitly for this purpose. If it were not for us and the salvation that we needed, he simply would never have had to have come. His death would have been completely unnecessary. What these men did was evil, but his death was not ultimately on account of them. It was on account of us. Everything wrong that we have done, everything that has separated us from him, it was too much for Jesus. He could not stand to be separated from us forever, and so he decided to give himself up for us. Neither is Good Friday a story about any heroes except for one. This story of Peter denying Jesus. Peter was one of Jesus' closest, most devout, and zealous followers. He had lived with Jesus, traveling around, being taught by him privately, receiving instruction among the apostles that the general populace had not even been able to see. He was so privileged to be able to spend this special time with Jesus. And Peter would go on to do great things for him. But today, even Peter was not there to stand beside Jesus. Jesus says that tonight you will all fall away. He knew that he would be completely abandoned, totally alone, unprotected, no one there to save him, stand up for him, to stand by him. All of us have been separated from Jesus. Just like Peter did not have enough in him to stand by him, certainly none of us can muster up enough purity, enough fervor to be able to obey Jesus if it were not for the gift that he gave us of his sacrifice. In Mark chapter 14, verses 55 through 59, it says, "Now the chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain testimony against Jesus to put him to death, and they were not finding any. For many were giving false testimony against him, but the testimony was not consistent. Some stood up and began to give false testimony against him, saying, 'We heard him say, I will destroy this temple made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another made without hands.' Not even in this respect was their testimony consistent." Jesus' death was completely unjust. He had done nothing to deserve it. Here, as the religious leaders were trying to dig up any reason that they could to get rid of Jesus, to have him convicted and put to death, they tried to bring people to lie, but they couldn't keep their story straight. Later on, there were more that were talking about something about building the temple and destroying it. This was something that Jesus had really said. But even whenever they were trying to use Jesus' own words against him, they couldn't keep their stories straight. The trial was a complete farce. It was completely wrong. There was nothing just about it, nothing reasonable. It was a complete disaster. But justice wasn't going to stop these men. This is a really poignant microcosm, something zoomed in on Jesus' purity, his innocence. Jesus had done absolutely nothing wrong. In a larger sense, God had done nothing wrong. He created us to be his friends, to love him, to worship him. But we, all of us, have turned away, have decided to pursue our own desires and to do what is wrong instead of what is right. This is no fault of God's. It's all ours. But still, Jesus wants us so much that he was ready to give himself for us. There is no justice here. There is absolutely nothing but pure selflessness. Jesus completely gave himself up for us, to be with us. In Romans 5:10 it says, "For if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of his Son, much more, having been reconciled, we shall be saved by his life." In Luke 23, verses 44 through 46, we see that death. "It was now about the 6th hour, and darkness fell over the whole land until the 9th hour, because the sun was obscured, and the veil of the temple was torn. And Jesus crying out with a loud voice said, 'Father, into your hands I commit my spirit.' Having said this, he breathed his last." The only way that we can be with God, the only way that we can have community with him, relationship and communication, the only way that we can be with him forever in eternity is through the sacrifice of Jesus. I do not think it's difficult for each one of us to look into our hearts and to find shortcomings, to find wrong, to find sin. This separates us from God absolutely. Our imperfection can never touch his imperfection, except through this beautiful sacrifice. A sacrifice of selflessness. A sacrifice that is voluntary. A sacrifice that was planned from the foundations of the earth, from the beginning of humankind. The most powerful, the most beautiful gift that has ever been given. The gift of life. Today, I hope that you have accepted Jesus' gift, that you have acknowledged his sacrifice and said, "Jesus, I would like to follow you. I would like to be a part of your kingdom." If you've joined God's family, I would invite you to take communion with me today. The Bible encourages us to take communion whenever we eat or drink. So if you'd like to go ahead and pause the video right now, go ahead and get something to eat, some bread to break, and some juice or anything really to drink. All right, are you ready? In Luke chapter 22, verses 19 through 20, it says, "And when he had taken some bread and gave thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' And in the same way, he took the cup after they had eaten, saying, 'This cup, which is poured out for you, is the new covenant in my blood.'" We happen to have some freshly baked bread here, and I think something that we miss sometimes and when we take communion and we use little bits of bread or wafer or cracker is about the breaking of bread. The symbol of the bread here is about Jesus' body being broken. It's always been a powerful word to me, the broken. His body was not just hurt, it wasn't just damaged, it was broken. To see a man truly, truly broken, to be made not functional anymore. This is what Jesus was ready to do. He was ready to be broken for us. If you'd like to join me in eating the bread today, Jesus was broken for us. In the scriptures, the Jews followed the law which told them to give a number of sacrifices when they would take the lives of animals as a symbol covering their sin. Jesus' death on the cross, it said that when a spear pierced his side, blood and water flowed out. Blood is the symbol, the essence of life. Jesus had to shed this blood to cover our sin. His lifeblood had to be given for our sake. He said, with this, there is a new covenant, a promise made that you and I can have life because of the life that Jesus gave up. God, thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for coming and living as a man so that you could die. Thank you for giving yourself for our sake. It was us that brought you here and made this happen to you. It was your love that's provided a bridge back to you. We take hold of this promise and this gift now, this sacrifice, so that we can be a part of your family, can follow you. Thank you for your broken body and your shed blood in our place. Amen. The story of Good Friday. I've painted a somber picture so that we can take time to reflect on the magnitude of this gift. But just wait a few days. This Sunday, Pastor Matt will bring you a special message, the message of Easter. Because even the story of death is really a story of life. This death took place so that you and I could live and live more abundantly. So the story doesn't end here. Come back, visit us on Sunday, and celebrate Easter, the story of life. Thank you. Bye.